quick editor's note about this video. This episode appears from a new series we're doing on the Command Your Brand show calling the Command Your Brand Icons. We've seen a gap over the years between our best clients and our clients that do pretty well. And one of the things I wanted to help people with is reach out to some of our best clients and set up these conversations so you can see what they're doing, how they're thinking, what they're doing in their business so they can create the most success and really command your brand. And this episode is with the client I absolutely cite the most in all content I create, and that's Dr. Mike HALE. He is our very first icon on the Command Your Brand Icon series of the Command Your Brand show. So I hope you enjoy this one. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Command Your Brand show. I am your host, Jeremy Ryan Slate, the CEO and founder of Command Your Brand. Reminder, if you want to grab our brand new book, which is ranked #1 in the PR space, is over at bestpodcastbook.com. If you're brand new to this channel, subscribe below, comment, and leave a comment, leave a like. We want to hear from you. And guys, I'm really excited for the conversation we're going to have today because I literally was saying to today's guest, he's a previous client of our agency, Command Your Brand, and whenever I do for the last 5 years, whenever I do a webinar or a mastermind talk or a stage talk, I literally always give the example of be like Dr. Mike HALE. You know, he's smart, he's funny, he really wants to add value to the shows he's on. And because of that, shows really love him and he wins in podcasting. So I was excited to get back with him today. So Dr. HALE, thanks for hanging out, man.
Man, thanks for having me on your show.
So how's life? It's been a bit.
Things are going great. I recently moved my business location to a bigger warehouse. I've been having fun recording. One of the things that I did differently in this location, and this is why I had to move, I realized my business...
And this location's in the middle of an aloe field, right?
Well,
as we can see by your background.
I visit the aloe field frequently, but... No, I needed a place to record content, to make more content. I wanted it easier, and we were just cramped and didn't have the space for it. And now I do. I actually created a whole podcast studio at the new warehouse. I got 4 different parts. I have a whiteboard area to record in. I have the green screen thing behind me. We have a studio over there and a kitchen studio on the other side. And everything's right here. Where I need it. And it's funny because right out of the gate, I'm talking about creating content. Mm-hmm. And that's actually what I wanted to share with you. I want to talk a little bit about the impact that, hiring your company had on my life, the changes that it's made, and just kind of things I learned along the way, because I think that this is something that so many people can benefit from. Mm-hmm. And I think about years ago how if you wanted to make it, you kind of had to get lucky or really know the right people. But now technology has changed it so much that you're really in charge of your future. You really have the ability. You could be alone by yourself on an island, and as long as you have one of these things, and a connection to the internet, you have everything you need to really create a business, start a business, and have an entire business. You don't need anything else. You need the technology, the ability to communicate.
So I guess what changed that viewpoint for you then? Because you had mentioned that, when we started working together around the same time, you really started looking at, social media, and you had done a big program there. I guess what were you looking at that you're I have to do something different with my business? 'Cause I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that think that way, right? They've been doing the same thing forever. And it's if I just, get 5 more patients through the door, or if I just do whatever, it's going to change. Right. And sometimes you have to do drastically different things in order to actually make that change. And I guess for you, what were you looking at, man?
Years ago, I saw this internet program. It was about making your first $1 in 30 days. It was about taking all the necessary steps. If you were on an island and this was all you had, taking all the necessary steps to kind of start a business and make your first $1 online. Mm-hmm. And it was a lot of work to make that first dollar, but I eventually did it. And it was like, whoa, this is pretty cool. I wonder what would happen if I apply these principles to my chiropractic office. And I did that. And my phone was ringing too much. And I also realized that for me, that wasn't actually the best business model. I had people driving 2 or 3 hours to see me, but they would pass 500 chiropractors on the way. And quite frankly, I like to joke and say chiropractic's kind of like intimacy. Even when it's bad, it's still pretty good.
I will say, though, I've been adjusted by 5 different chiropractors in my life. And the last 10 years of my life, my mother-in-law has actually been my chiropractor. There is something to say about somebody that can do joints and extremities and all those things as like an athlete. Like, oh man, like the right chiropractor does make all the difference. But, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, well, it's a wonderful thing. But I felt like, they were passing other chiropractors to get to me. And I didn't feel like I was really adding that much because there's a lot of great chiropractors out there. But this thing kind of fell on my lap, this, I'll say, product. And it became very important to me that it survived when the person that introduced it passed away. 96 years old, he had a heart attack, and he was kind of a one-man show. And I had one of my patients using this product. It became very, very important to me. So I kind of rescued it, and I started applying the principles to that because I'm one person. I can only see so many patients. But with a website, in the digital media, it's working when I'm sleeping. Mm-hmm. So I started applying these principles to that product, and eventually I stopped taking new patients. I still take some a little bit here and there. I love chiropractic. I love giving chiropractic, but if I take on too many, it interferes with what I'm really doing, where I'm making a difference. Mm-hmm. So anyway, this program, the cool thing about it, the whole concept was based on market leadership. Mm. And this guy had this weird formula. It was kind of like a Einstein equals MC squared type thing. Only it was ML equals C times CN. All right. What does that mean? Market leadership is content times consistency. Mm. And I put that to the test. As a chiropractor, it filled my chiropractic office. And then towards this business, and the funniest thing happened, it was probably about a year into it, not even a year into it. I have an aloe vera company. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I moved this company into about 200 square feet in my chiropractic office. The entire company was in 200 square feet. And I remember the largest people in the industry, the owner of this company and his top salesperson, made a 4.5-hour drive to my location to see this business because I created a huge presence online. Mm. And they thought, who is this Dr. HALE and this new aloe vera company? We have to see what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And I remember they just kind of cold called and popped in. They said, well, we'd like to see the company. Where is it? I said, you're sitting in it. It's this little box that we're in right now. And we were actually running a pretty decent sized business, one that would sustain a family out of that little space. Eventually, it took over the other 800 square feet in the office. And then now where we are here, we do a pretty good sized business, even in this small warehouse. Mm-hmm. We have a huge freezer and the forklift and the studio. We got a lot going on. It's cool. It's a lot of fun. So the whole content times consistency. There was this concept of a 365 program. Have you heard of a 365?
I haven't heard of that, but it makes me think of something that's probably every day of the year.
Yeah. Or once every week for a year.
Okay.
Or, 3 times a week or whatever your schedule is. The concept was, for what you're doing, be consistent at it. Now, if it's putting out a big full program, it might be once a week because you're making this incredible program. If it's taking photos, it might be one photo a day that you're posting on Instagram. Mm-hmm. and you're choosing, I'm going to be a photographer, and your first post or your first program or your first podcast or your first YouTube video might suck. But if you follow the plan and be consistent, by the end of the year, they're probably going to be coming, pretty good. They're probably going to be a good message or a beautiful photo, and you've learned how to, tweak the images and things like that. And you start, learning. You've heard, if you want to master something, teach it. It's kind of that whole progression of, okay, I'm doing this. Now I got it really down, and now I'm teaching others to do it.
So what's really interesting to that is, not to cut you off, but we've been running Command Your Brand for 8 years now, closing on 9 years. And over that time, we've always had pretty much 2 programs, a 6-month program and a 12-month program. And what we actually ended up doing January 1st of this year, we actually stopped offering the 6-month program. And we found that it accounted for 90.4% when I ran the numbers of refunds, chargebacks, and unhappy clients. And I think it goes back to, actually, the funny thing about it is the simplicity goes back to the time period. Our year clients have always just been happier, but it makes sense, I guess, because you're committing to that time period like you're talking about.
Yeah, it would make sense to me that really, in the first 6 months, you haven't really mastered it. You're not going to master anything in 6 months. I guess you could, but for the most part, you get better the more you do, and it starts making more and more sense. So that's probably what happened in that.
Anyway, sorry to cut you off, but you were talking about committing to this mastery for a year or whatever, in whatever capacity that may be.
Yeah, well, for me, I started making YouTube videos, and I want you to bring me back to the podcast because, and this is going to be an important point. We'll get to this. Sure. Later. And the important point is you can grow it, and then there's an exponential way to grow things, and that's what we'll get to, and that's where the podcast really came in. So I started creating content and essentially giving everything away for free. All of the information you needed to make my product was freely given. What people would do is they'd see the content and they'd say, wow, this really looks good, and I can do this, but it looks like he's doing it right. I should just get it from him. And
how do you get over that too? Because I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. I'll be honest with you, man. I've been doing this for almost 10 years, and I still struggle with it from time to time. How do you get over the idea of just giving it all away?
Well, I kind of feel like that is what market leadership is. It's not really trying to trick people out of money. It's kind of freely giving to those that want it. Now we charge for our services. But it doesn't care. Market leadership doesn't care who buys and who doesn't. I have something that the right people need. There was a scripture that said something. I'm going to fail at it now. I think it was John the Baptist who said something like, a man can receive only what is given him from heaven. And I don't want to create customers that aren't supposed to be buying from me. I'm here for the ones that are. Yes. Those are the ones that I want to help, that need my help, are going to appreciate my help. If I've ever made a sale happen, those are the ones that go south. Those are the ones that, people want refunds. They're not happy. I don't like the way your product tastes. I'm not selling you something that tastes good. I'm telling you, I'm exchanging something that's going to meet your needs so you can get well. It's funny, our buy page, it even says on it, if you want something that tastes good, go buy somewhere else. Our aloe doesn't taste good. It is what it is.
So you start giving all this information away for free, right? You start really over delivering on it. Then I guess, where does that go from there? What happens next?
All right. Well, let's talk about the concept of the 20.
Okay.
In your market space, who would you say some of the top 20 people are? The market leaders in your space?
It's interesting because I feel like there's 3 or 4 at the top, and then probably 17 that are all kind of on the same level, if that makes sense. So it's Interview Valet, Interview Connections, and then there's a few other brands that do similar things. I'd say that's about it. Yeah.
Okay. And anyone listening to this podcast, ask yourself that same question. What's my space? Is it gaming? Is it, photography? Who are the top 20 people in this niche market space? Well, this guy on this program I was watching about market leadership asked that question. And I started thinking, oh, this person, that person, that person. And then the next question was the one that hurt the most. He said, how many of them know who you are?
Wow.
Well, none was my answer at the time. And why not? Well, because I'm not creating content that they're consuming. Yeah. So you put that answer together with the 365 project. It's time to start creating content. Eventually, it's going to become meaningful. And the cool thing was, over the next couple of years, I started getting to know all of these people, not by me going to them, but them coming to me.
Interesting.
And I remember my number one guy. I'm tempted to say his name, but I'm not going to. The funny thing was, I was kind of in a rush, and I was actually in my front yard making a video at the time. And at the time, my son was my cameraman. He was probably 5 years old at the time, but really good with the phone and pointing it up at daddy kind of thing.
Oh, that's but my 3-year-old thinks she's a YouTuber right now. It's quite funny to watch her like walk around the house, and she thinks she's recording something, but the camera isn't actually on. So I do understand.
Well, in this case, my number one guy calls me, and he's at an airport. He's on his cell phone. He says, Dr. Haley, I'm doing a piece on aloe vera, and I know that no one knows more about aloe vera than you. I've got some questions for you. Now, I'm not the person that knows the most about aloe vera. I know the people that do. Mm-hmm. I communicate with them, and I get their advice and their direction. I've learned a lot along the way. I created the content that makes you think I know more about aloe than anyone else. I didn't tell him that. What I did is I said, Dr. So-and-so, I'm really busy right now.
I am in my front yard with my 5-year-old recording a video. How dare you?
Well, no, it was funny because I was actually wrapping it up really quick, and I knew I had to get to the office. I was probably still seeing patients at the time. I forget what my reason was. I knew I had like 2 or 3 minutes that I could spend on the phone with him. And I'm really busy right now. What's your email address? I'm going to send you links to all of the videos that are going to answer your questions.
Oh, cool.
Now, so I sent him that, and a couple of weeks later, I'm subscribed to his newsletters, and out comes this piece where he's essentially duplicating everything that I did on my videos.
So he reshot his own stuff, just saying what you said.
It worked out. I was glad for him, and not too many months later, I ran into him at a trade show, and we had a good hour-long discussion. But it was neat because the whole concept: how many of them know you? Mm-hmm. Now, all of them. Mm-hmm. But back then, none of them.
Wow.
None of them. Yeah. So content times consistency. It works, man. Mm-hmm. It works.
So then I go ahead.
Well, podcasting, I hadn't been podcasting at that point yet. That was just YouTube videos. Mm-hmm. This is where the magic happens. And yes, I got a lot of subscribers creating content consistently. Then something magical happened. I appeared on someone else's show. This is where the magic is. This is the exponential growth. I appeared on someone else. Someone reached out to me and said, "Can I interview you?" Sure, why not? The next 2 or 3 days, as that content was released, I picked up about 1,000 email subscribers.
Wow.
I was getting 3 or 4 subscribers a day. But now the magic of networking, I was put in front of someone else's audience. I wasn't just picking up subscribers from the Google algorithms. Mm-hmm. Someone lands on my content or the YouTube algorithm and says, okay, I'll subscribe. That was the day when I logged into my email system and turned off the notifications where I am notified every time I get a subscriber.
I'm laughing because I remember when we finally started to hit critical mass on YouTube, I did the same thing because it's like it just gets overwhelming, man. But it's exciting in the beginning. It's so exciting,
YouTube subscribers, yeah, sure, that was exciting. The email subscribers, man, they say the money is in the list. Well, there is truth in that. Mm-hmm. The size of your email list has a lot to do with the size of your influence, mm-hmm. how much influence you have. So that was about the time when I started getting on other people's shows. Eventually, I learned about podcasting, and the podcasting thing is a whole new level. It's even if you have an audience of 10, there's a new perception of you. Oh, you're not making YouTube. You have a podcast. Mm-hmm. This is like a show. This is something that's important, and people see you differently. Eventually that grows, especially if you're getting on other people's podcasts. Mm-hmm. So I had an interest in starting a podcast. I did it, and and my audience was very small at the beginning. And it's not huge now, but there's a new perception of, oh, Dr. HALE, oh, you have a podcast? When is your podcast? Where can I find it? And in conversation. It's funny, when I'm here at the office, I'll answer the phone sometimes, if it's ringing and ringing and ringing, no one's getting to it. I pick it up. I'll say, HALE Nutrition, this is Mike. I don't say it's Dr. HALE. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, Friday, I do that. And someone is saying, oh, let me just tell you, you're Dr. HALE. He is so wonderful. I just got done listening to him on a podcast. At the time, it was they had just listened to the Dr. Corey Stern podcast. Mm-hmm. And, oh, he's so wonderful. And I love Dr. HALE. He's great. I'm agreeing with her, of course, having a good old time.
He's great. He's handsome. Yeah, I love Dr. HALE. Yeah.
Well, the handsome thing, that's a funny thing, because that's another great thing about podcasting, because, you don't have to have a face. You could just be a voice. And, it's a lot easier to just be a voice in the beginning. But now I'm comfortable and with the camera. I don't care what people think anymore. But early on, it was a lot easier to do just voice things and voiceovers and put images up and talk behind them on YouTube even.
So let me ask you this, Dr. HALE, because you mentioned in the beginning, shows may be smaller, they may have less of an audience. I think that's one thing I do see people really struggle with, whether it's as a guest or as a host. They have the idea that if it is not the right audience size, nothing's going to happen for them. And the thing that's amazing is I've seen clients, we've been doing this for almost 10 years. I've seen clients that it can be a small audience, but they show up. We have a guy right now, he's in mold remediation. One of the smartest people I've ever met about mold. The guy knows crazy stuff about mold. He actually did a FaceTime call with me around my house, finding mold stuff. And it was so helpful. But he goes on bigger shows and he goes on smaller shows, and he's had a lot of action on small shows, even because the audience is that big because of how he shows up. And I guess when you look at that, how do you get the right viewpoint on that too? Because you've been very good at that.
Well, I love the small shows every bit as much as the big shows. Every time you're on a podcast, it's an opportunity to connect with a like mind. You're not mm-hmm. on a show if they're not like-minded. You're on a show because they're like-minded. And you're meeting one more person in that space that has that same goal to help people in a certain way, whether it's financially or nutritionally or educationally. It's another connection that you're making. So I see it as an opportunity to make a friend in the same thought space. And it's also practice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're perfecting your skill, this whole 365 concept where you're repeating. Every time you do it, you get better at it.
Mm-hmm. So I guess
So
where does that it could be YouTube videos, it could be podcasts. I guess where does that fit in like your content marketing strategy? Because I think a lot of times people look at a podcast and they're like, all right, I was on a podcast, that's the end of it. And I think that people don't realize like I know guys like here in the New York area, like they'll pay people $5,000 to do a fake interview with them just to have the content to use. And I guess like what's the value in that part of it in terms of like actually having stuff you can use?
Well, it's funny because like right now, this is actually out of my space. You know, I'm in the nutritional space, but we're talking business.
Yeah.
There's value in this right now because I've tried to share my experience. This has been life-changing for me. The whole, content creation, YouTube, podcasting, life-changing. I have a very solid, strong business running. It's changed my life. Mm-hmm. I've tried to share this with a lot of people. Well, now I'm creating content with you outside of my space. I get to just point to a link now and say, listen to this. So there's always benefit. There's benefit in everything. I love you. I love what you've done for me and our company and all the shows that you put me on. It was great. It was life-changing. It changed my perspective on things. It did get to the point where now I have people calling me, so I didn't need you anymore.
But I think that at the same time, like we had another client a number of years ago, Philip Stutz, really awesome guy. And he had said, like, you guys almost did too good of a job because now I don't need you. But I also think there's a ton of value in that too, right? Like I want to get you to the point where people notice you and they're calling you. Like I take it as a compliment that you don't have to pay me anymore. You know what I mean?
Well, that is market leadership.
Yes.
You're leading people and you're developing them. Mm-hmm. You're mentoring people through this. And, regardless of how small they are, how do you get past it? There's a lot of people that I've taken from nothing, led them through this concept. I think of one of my friends, actually, Tim. He was a customer that had an idea of a product that is actually very similar to mine, not in competition with mine, but the kind of people that would want to buy my products would want to buy his products. And I encouraged him along the way and showed him everything that I'm doing from content creation. I had him on my show. On my YouTube channel, I had him on my podcast. I showed him what website I was using and the tools and the e-commerce platform and just kind of all the things I knew about business, the concepts that I'm sharing here. His business is huge. It has grown in just a few years from an idea to boom. He did everything right. So I have the joy of now, believe it or not, his business is referring a lot of like-minded people to our products. So there was nothing in it for me at the start, but it just so happens that I have a lot of customers because of his business.
So let me ask you this then, I think the thing people don't consider is when we're looking at, building thought leadership, or when we look at becoming, that person in the space that people know, or, that market leadership like you're talking about. Number one, what's the importance in patience? Because I think a lot of people want to come out of the gate and have market leadership, but at the same time, like it takes work and it takes time. And then number two, what were your biggest learning points from building market leadership?
Well, let's go with the number two first. The biggest points from building market leadership. The biggest thing that I learned is that it works. It's a formula, and you just follow it. You just do it. And you learn from your mistakes too. When something hurts, I've only shaved over my Adam's apple so many times before I learned that I can pull the skin to the side.
My wife did make me cut my mustache off this morning for this interview, so there we go.
That's funny. Wow. Well, that's another thought too that I have, and one of the greatest lessons in life that I learned. But you learn from your mistakes, and I think I got that actually from Charles Stanley. You know who Charles Stanley is?
I don't know.
He's a preacher, I think, in Georgia.
Okay.
If I recall. And I don't even know if he's around anymore, because this was probably 10 or 15 years ago that I heard this sermon. And it was the one and only sermon that I ever purchased from him.
Wow.
But it was about receiving compliments and criticisms. And compliments are easy. Oh, hey, thanks, but you don't have much to learn from them.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot more to learn from a criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not true, just to consider it. So he kind of had a formula, and we all, even compliments we're not receiving right. A lot of times we might handle it improperly.
I'm really bad at receiving compliments, Dr. Haley. I'll be honest with you. Like, you know what I mean? I kind of like, oh, thanks. Cool, man. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't like praise, if that sounds funny.
But that's the easiest way to handle it, is just to say thank you. And that was his point.
Yeah.
All you have to do is just say thank you. But a lot of us would handle it improperly. Like, for instance, someone might say, hey, that's a real nice shirt, or a nice jacket, or I like your hat. And you might say, oh, thanks a lot. I got it for $5 at the flea market. Well, what you just did is you just insulted their taste. So he would give a way that you can actually deflect the compliment, so that you don't seem so, oh, hey, prideful, and, oh, thank you. My wife picked that out for me, or so you're kind of deflecting it. There's ways of handling compliments that are very nice and gentle, or you could return the compliment and say, oh man, I like your shirt, or whatever the case is, So there was the whole learning how to handle compliments, but more importantly, learning how to handle the critiques. And that critique is even from your angriest customer that is delivered in the worst way. I bought your product and, it showed up 2 weeks late and FedEx can't find my house. And, okay, first, don't get upset. Don't get emotional. But hear the person and find out if there's anything that you could do better. What went wrong? Because, maybe I put the wrong address on the label. Maybe we didn't process it properly. I might actually be at fault. It might not be the carrier's fault, FedEx or UPS or USPS Mail or DHL or whoever you used. It might not be their fault. Is there anything I can learn from this? Can I improve my communication with customers so there's better tracking? Every single critique, is there truth to this? What can I do better? How can I improve my business and my customer relations to at least prevent them from getting so angry when something does go wrong?
Yes. So I guess in terms of that, like, when you're looking at investing your time into market leadership, then like the other part of that question, like, how do you handle that? Because I think, as I mentioned, a lot of people out of the gate, they all want to go on Joe Rogan, man, and they're pretty upset when Joe doesn't invite them on week one. Like, how do you handle kind of the time it takes to build market leadership?
Yeah, well, I know what I did along the way, and I still do it. And every opportunity, you're not going to get on the big shows right from the start. So every opportunity to be on a show, even a small one, is an opportunity to improve what you're doing and get to the next level. So if I do 10 shows that are completely entry point, and then I'm going to some that have some mid-sized shows and audiences, well, now I'm kind of practiced up. I'm a lot smoother at what I'm doing, and I've earned the right to be here on this show. I haven't earned the Joe Rogan show yet. That doesn't mean I won't, because as I do enough of these middle shows, I'm getting to the larger and eventually to the top. So for me, that's how I handled it.
Sure.
Every single show, no matter how small, is an opportunity. And I don't care if I'm your first guest and you're just starting out. I'll be your first guest. What an honor. I'd love to help you out and help you get started. That's how I look at it.
What's the biggest thing that lights you up in what you do? Because, whether it's, with the information you give, or, whether how you help people with HALE or chiropractic, like, you just seem like a guy that genuinely wants to help people. And I guess what lights you up so much, man?
I do love working and I love what I do. And yeah, it's the feedback from the customers is so much more rewarding than the paycheck. Mm-hmm. The paycheck's great. It's important. It's important to get paid for what you do. Worker's worth his wages. Mm-hmm. But if you don't enjoy it, man, and so for me, the reward is the customer experience and hearing them. And sometimes it's about the products. Sometimes it's about the show, the information, like the lady that had called on Friday. I just love, the podcast, and, I love Dr. HALE, and he teaches me so much, I love that. That's what excites me. That's what gets me going.
Well, Dr. HALE, for people that want to find out more about what you're doing, how they can connect with you, how they can get your products, how should they do that?
If you go to drhaley.com, drhaley.com, that's actually my podcast blog. That's not the corporate blog, but on the top right are links to everything, all the different social medias, and that gets you connected.
Very cool. Well, Dr. Michael HALE, thank you so much for doing this today, man. Like, as I said, I feel like I always give you the example of like who you should be as a podcast guest. So thanks for doing this today, man.
Thank you.